Hey, Sam.
Hey,
Dude,
Nathan.
thank you so much for letting me or giving me the opportunity. And thank you to Marcelino for letting us come in and do this whole episode thing, making thing, whatever I'd call it, in a really legit space to actually be able to, I don't know, record a dope podcast and try to make people feel better about themselves and teach them valuable skills, man. So thank you.
You're welcome, man. Thank you again. And thanks to Your Home Real Estate for letting us use this.
Oh,
room.
yes. Thank you.
Really excited.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So one of the things I kind of wanted to do here is I just wanted to cover some topics that we already had before, and, you know, try and just make the conversation flow. But I didn't really script this meeting with you, and I tend to find that we do pretty well when we don't script anything. We just kind of get talking and have a real good time. But one thing it was something I learned from you early on in our friendship, which is a fairly short friendship, and yet I feel like I've become very, very close with you in a short amount of time, and I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate you so much. But one thing that you talked to me about, and this was in our first podcast together, was about just kind of the shame and fear complex that most people go through when they're, you know, just struggling with being a human being. And so I really want to cover that again with you because it's made an impact on my life. I think about it a lot. I find it like impacts my behavior and makes me want to change my behavior. So I want to offer that to other people. Can you tell me a little more about it again?
Yes. So fear-shame dynamic. People with high testosterone brains and high estrogen brains, they actually have two different core vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. And so someone with a high testosterone brain, their core vulnerability is shame. So the alarm that they have in their head, like this constant dialogue with someone with the shame complex is, I'm not doing good enough. I'm not worthy. I don't show up to the plate the way that I need to. I'm failing. Like I don't deserve intimate relationships because I fail as a person. Yeah. And so like this dialogue is something with someone with a high testosterone brain. This is the dialogue they have in their head most of the time. And so if you're unaware of this, it really can take a grip on your reality. Like it can be so loud that you cease to do anything. And it's very challenging to deal with. And so why people with high testosterone brains have this core vulnerability is due to the fact that when we were hunter-gatherers, people with high testosterone were typically bigger built, and their core vulnerability was shame, and shame is a motivating emotion to do better. And so if a male did not protect a woman and child from a predator, they would be immediately kicked out of the tribe. And if you're kicked out of the tribe,
that's pretty much like you're killed. Like you relied on your tribe completely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so shame is a motivating emotion to do better. And so if these protectors didn't protect, like they would be kicked out of the tribe. But also if they didn't do their part of being in part of the tribe, and generally males were the hunters. And so if they weren't coming back with food, like they would feel pretty bad about that, right? And so, and you can observe this at a very young age in the male's life cycle. And it's not just males, it's people with high testosterone brains specifically. It's people with high testosterone.
I really wanted to highlight that. I feel like it really transcends just like our cultural understanding of maleness and femaleness. It's actually like chemicals in our brain that kind of induce these types of behaviors. And just because that chemical or that hormone was more present in males throughout human history doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, maleness is limited to this feeling and stuff like that.
100%.
So I just wanted to point that out because I really liked that distinction there.
Yes. Yeah, so you're absolutely correct. And these are all just neurochemicals. People with high estrogen typically are female. People with high testosterone typically male. Yeah. And so this shame dynamic can actually be observed in babies. So like someone with the core vulnerability of shame, if you were to look at them in a crib, like typically on average, males will avoid eye contact. So you can only hold eye contact with your baby boy or baby girl.
You're a high testosterone baby.
100%. And they'll maintain eye contact very, very briefly, and then they'll shift their eyes around the room. And this is due to that fact of that core vulnerability of shame, which is pretty crazy. And so the inverse happens with someone with high estrogen brain. You can peer in like eye gaze.
Lock eyes with a high estrogen containing baby, whatever you'd call it.
My flow of speaking today is not the best.
No, you're good.
It's okay. You have those days.
Yes, you do.
It's a fine thing. Anyways, so
these high estrogen containing babies.
High estrogen containing babies, you can maintain eye contact with them a lot more. People tend to emotionally connect with that because like maintaining eye contact with anyone, you'll emotionally connect. And so like people will emotionally connect with a high estrogen baby more so than they'll connect with a high testosterone baby. But both babies need the same amount of attention.
Yeah, of course. But some seek it out more so than the other, I guess, right?
Exactly. And you may dismiss someone with a high testosterone baby because you would assume that they're not interested in you, right? So if this baby's not maintaining eye contact, you're like, okay, well, this baby obviously is like an individualistic, right? They can do things on their own.
Yeah.
Whereas like this baby with high estrogen, I can maintain eye contact with him for a very long time. We have a deeper emotional
building a
bond,
connection there.
Right?
Sort of like a social bond at that point, right?
Exactly. Social bond. That's the key term. And so why this is necessary, going back to the hunter-gatherers, is like the emotional bonds. Typically, on average, people with high estrogen typically didn't have the upper body strength to protect themselves from predators, and they were more emotionally connected with their tribesmen. And so women on average can see better and hear better than men.
Really?
Yes, literally they can. And so if you were in a hunter-gatherer situation, who would be the best person to raise the alarm? Someone that could see better and hear better, correct?
Do you think they would have known that though? Or you feel like, I guess the only reason I question that is just because, like, you know, we've seen in human history how we've like really limited women and stuff. So, I mean, were we really letting them have our ancestors been like aware of this? Is I guess what I'm asking.
I don't know if they were like. I mean, I would assume. I don't know. I'm not a hunter gatherer, but in that situation,
sorry to derail there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure that over time you would know, and I'm sure that like the person that would like first raise the alarm,
it was just
consistently
be really good at it.
Yeah, exactly. And so these people that were emotionally connected, see better, hear better, would raise the alarm to alert the person that could physically defend the predator from them, while they took care of the young and the people that couldn't necessarily physically fight off those threats. And so biologically, there's reasons that we have the fear and shame complex. And what you need to understand is like the motivating emotion behind it. So fear is a motivating emotion to protect yourself. So what fear is telling you is I'm unsafe. I need to put myself in a new position. I need to protect the people that need to be protected.
Yeah.
Shame is a motivating emotion to do better.
Yeah.
So like if you're not constantly contributing. So like these are the best motivating signals for us to push through vulnerable emotion and to stay safe and to stay safe over the long term. However, like our limbic brain or our toddler brain, the brain that's fully developed at 3 years old, the same brain that we share with every other mammal on the planet, can confuse you based out that you don't understand what the signal is trying to tell you. You just hear the alarm. So I like to picture this as kind of like a fire alarm in your head. Right? And so if you have a core vulnerability of shame, you have a fire alarm going off in your head saying, I am terrible all the time. I'm not worth it. And like that's what the alarm sounds like.
And it's set off, especially in our culture today, it's set off by things that like, you know, the whole, I guess what you're getting to is like the whole reason we have it is we evolve for it, right? And yet we're letting this be triggered by I dropped my phone or something, or like something stupid. Sorry, go on.
Yes. And then fear, motivating emotion to protect yourself. So what that sounds like in your head, that fire alarm sounds like I'm unsafe all the time. Everyone is out to get me. My emotional relationships are like dwindling. They're not going to be consistent. Like fear is basically just an alarm saying, I am unsafe all the time. Shame, and a fire alarm saying, I am terrible all the time.
Yeah. And this is affecting some people more than others in certain respects. Some people have that core vulnerability of shame, and that's affecting them more often. Some people have that core vulnerability of fear that's affecting them more often. But it sounds like you're saying we're kind of all feeling this both at the same time, just to varying degrees as well, right?
Correct. Yeah. So we all experience fear and we all experience shame. But like some people, their core vulnerability or the alarm that most frequently goes off. So like normally you would have either a fear complex or a shame complex. And that just,
it's all been piled on since
exactly. So you feel all emotions, but like the emotion that really goes off all the time. And that's kind of the fear and shame dynamic is I like to picture it as an alarm going off. And so if your fire alarm goes off in your house, you have to check it.
Yeah.
You have to check it. So like, if the fire alarm went off, you wouldn't be running around the house being like, we're all going to die.
There's a fire for sure.
We're going to be dead. We're dead.
Yeah.
Like, the fire alarm went off. We're all fucking dead. Like, it's over.
Yeah.
You know? And so most people, that is how they engage with their alarms that
All
go
the
off.
time.
And so like,
Yeah.
if you're limbically responding to those alarms, validating them as reality. So when you hear that alarm go off, you're like, yeah, you're right. I'm the most terrible person ever. And like, now I'm going to get angry with myself because like when I'm angry, it's a temporary stimulant in the brain. So like anger it has an adrenaline type effect or an amphetamine type effect.
Yeah.
And it also is I forgot what the term is, an analgesic.
Oh,
It's something where it suppresses pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you stub your toe, you're not like quoting a Bible verse.
Yeah.
You're saying, fuck, that hurt.
Yeah.
That was very painful. That sucked.
And it's weird that anger actually does kind of like
It does.
abate the pain. Like
Yes.
it actually makes it go away.
It abates it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a Band-Aid step approach to dealing with your vulnerability. So like,
But by God, we'll continue to do it.
yeah, so 100%.
And what's actually really interesting about this to me that we also have talked about is just how that kind of shows that anger is really a masking emotion.
Yes.
That it's usually hiding something that's deeper, that's something going on much more. And it sounds like both of these core vulnerabilities can easily lead to anger. I mean, let's face it, like it's easy to get angry when you're feeling shameful. And it's also really easy to get angry when you're feeling like your life is threatened. It almost feels like the only way you can take control of those situations, which is why I feel like this information has been so valuable for me. Because like, all of us experience emotions, but not all of us are aware of when they're happening to us or when we're like actually trying to deal with them. And by knowing this kind of like just understanding these core concepts and being able to identify like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling like really shameful or embarrassed right now, then you can actually start to make choices that like, or you sort of have the ability to start dealing with that and actually being able to work through it and learn from it rather than constantly fighting it or trying to avoid it, right?
Yes. So once you can acknowledge it, then you can start to test it in reality.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling shame, so say you embarrassed yourself, right? And then immediately you start dogging on yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then you could actually test in reality, be like, do these people actually think less of me?
Yeah.
Maybe not. Like,
probably not.
Am I actually in danger? Let's test that in reality right now. Like, is this real or is this just an alarm that I'm hearing in my head?
Yeah, exactly.
And so once you can like acknowledge it and kind of like be aware that, hey, like I'm in control of checking if this is real or not, then you can start to develop a relationship with that vulnerability. And once you do that, once you develop a relationship with it, and understand what it's signaling you to do, you can actually observe it as a very beneficial thing. So for example, like shame is a motivating emotion to do better.
Yeah.
So I believe on average, people with high testosterone, typically males, what is the best thing that like males have contributed to their species? Inventions.
Yeah.
Like crazy, like we got to the fucking moon. Like there's so many, like I do believe that our core vulnerabilities bring out the most beautiful aspects of both the female and the male.
Yeah.
And like for females, like that, like there's nothing like
or for
feeling love from like your mother, that comforting like presence of emotional bonding.
Yeah.
And like using an invention, using the cell phone, using like the radio, like those things are phenomenal. And if someone didn't feel the emotion of, I need to make this better, and like I can push myself to do better, maybe we wouldn't have these things that we're recording on right now.
Yeah.
You know? And so, like,
Exactly.
I think that
someone had to feel that there needed to be a better way to record something at some point.
Exactly.
And that had to do with some shame at some point about it not being good enough at the moment, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool. And I had a thought, but it passed by me. It's okay. But essentially, I really like being able to see that and letting yourself like learn from it, like you said, and sort of be able to self-check and understand, like, if you really are in a fearful situation, or if you really are in a situation where, you know, you're feeling immense amount of shame. But yeah, like you said, like, is everyone really thinking less of me right now? Half the people in the room didn't even see, right? And this actually comes from something I learned while I was in my health psychology class with fighting depression and anxiety. And they talk about like putting your thoughts on trial, which it sounds exactly like what you're talking about, where you're essentially saying like, oh, I just had this thought run across my head, which, you know, it starts with the awareness of like, I'm not good enough right now. And then you just have to sort of you have to learn how to be able to capture that idea and be like, hold on, really? Am I really the worst person in the world right now? Am I really worthless? Like, you know, all these things. And, you know, I think at first your brain's kind of like, yeah, of course I am. I am the worst. You know, so something I always say to people, if they're like, oh, I'm the worst, I'm like, whoa, you're worse than Hitler? And they're usually like, well, no. And I'm like, then don't say that about yourself, man. See,
I love it.
you know, like, but I think that's super valuable, and just this knowledge in general that you've, you know, shared with me and now shared with other people and probably shared with a lot of people is just super helpful in helping me, you know, understand my emotions, learning to deal with them, transcend them, and specifically like learn from them, like you're talking about. So
yes,
really appreciate it.
I really like that. You initially, you were just mentioning that people immediately tell themselves that they're terrible, first of all, and then with an alternative perspective, they can really pull things into reality. And so how we first process our information, I believe, is through the limbic brain. Through that, like the alarm goes off first, and then you have to check it. So like all of the information getting thrown at us is processed first through the limbic brain, which is a very monocular lens. It's a one point of view.
Yeah.
And then so that brain type is developed at 3 years old. The prefrontal cortex to use the binocular vision, 2 points of view.
Nice.
Normally developed near the age of 30. And it's only with that binocular perspective that really puts things into like
the human
reality.
Perspective,
exactly.
Right?
So
the human's understanding of reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with you interjecting and saying, are you worse than Hitler? Now you have another perspective that they had to incorporate into their reality tunnel, and that's what made the sense, right? That's what brought things to balance. And so like
helped you.
Most issues that people have are because they're viewing everything through the lens of the monocular, the one point of view. And it's only if you can tailor your binocular vision 2 points of view that you can actually start to make sense of the world. And so like,
and that's a bitch of a process, right? Like it's not.
It's constant maintenance. It's constant maintenance, and you're gonna forget because like your limbic brain goes off, and that alarm is pretty loud sometimes. And like it can get very overwhelming. You're like, yeah, this is right.
It's supposed to be right. Like it was evolved to like make us survive from a tiger attack. So of course, like it's gonna be all consuming.
Correct. If you were not afraid that there was like a tiger going on, or if you weren't like, if you didn't feel shame of like, yo, there's not enough food. Like, yes.
And then people would die and your 100%. Genes would not be here, right?
Exactly. We would not be here. So there's a biological purpose of why this happens.
That's just a real cool point about it is like not trying to be like, oh, I've recognized how the fear and shame complex cause problems in my life, but I'm not having to be like, these are bad, never feel these. It's sort of understanding I know why they're here. And like you said, building a relationship with it and starting to learn from it and grow from it. Because I think that's something that people often do when, I don't know, in anything, we overcorrect. You know, we say that, oh, something that we've identified something as bad, so we have to like completely go the other way. But I like that at least we understand that, you know, you have to keep that part of it and keep that balance, right?
Yes. Everything is here for a reason. And like, it's how we work with what we have that makes it the experience.
Yes.
Which like going back to the binocular vision, most so if you're not aware of the fear shame dynamic, and if you're in a relationship, that fear-shame dynamic probably rules your relationship.
Ooh, this is important.
One thing is very important. So fear and shame trigger one another. So someone's fear will stimulate someone's shame, and someone's shame will stimulate someone's fear. So if you're unaware of this, you can be caught in these battles where you're blaming each other for being triggered without either one of you doing it to each other. So for example, someone with a shame complex is driving a car. They're driving, and someone in the passenger seat has a fear complex. This person's driving down the highway. They might be driving a little too fast for someone with fear. So that someone with fear, their alarm is, I'm unsafe all the time. So at that speed, with someone with a fear complex, would be more
It sounds like it's like since they're being primed for their fear complex, then the person who has the shame complex is going to be, if this person who is experiencing fear like talks about it, it's like, hey, you're going too fast, stop. Like the person with the shame complex is be like, what, you don't think I'm a good driver?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
what do you mean? Like,
Yes.
I'm a great driver, and then starts driving more recklessly,
100%,
right?
Yes. And so that shame that person felt like, oh, I'm going to drive faster. They're doubling down now because they're trying to protect their alarm of I suck at driving. So
exactly.
The acknowledgement of, hey, we're driving too fast. Her alarm, or that person's alarm, is, hey, I'm unsafe. And I'm going to mention that to someone.
Yeah.
The person driving, I am unsafe. Hey, you're telling me I'm a bad driver. I'm terrible at charioteering. So I'm going to double down. And by doubling down, you're now stimulating her fear even more because now she's like, I listed that I felt unsafe for my life and you don't give a shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's like, oh, maybe I need to be afraid of you now, essentially.
Yes. Like, what does this
even
mean?
more so?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and then that response, like, yeah, that makes total sense. Like, you're being a dick.
Yeah.
And then like the other person
just escalates.
I'm being a dick. You're right. Like, I'm terrible at everything that I do. Like, I'm a bad driver and I'm an asshole. Like,
can't do anything right.
Yeah, can't do anything right. And so now you're both triggered.
Oof.
You didn't intend to do, like, there was no intention of harming one another.
Yeah.
But you're now both triggered. And when you're triggered, cortisol is released. Cortisol is the stress chemical. And when the stress chemical is released, it directs blood flow from your prefrontal cortex, that binocular vision, and it directs it to your amygdala, your flight or fight response, your binocular vision. And so when someone is triggered, if they feel stressed, their brain is not in doesn't have the ability to logically think because it's only using a one perspective lens. So when you're triggered, you cannot blame the other person. You have to just acknowledge it based off of the feelings that you have. Like, when you feel shame, know when you feel stressed. And so if no one was intentionally trying to harm you, and it's pretty obvious, you have to just understand how the brain works. Be like, cortisol is going through my head. I'm not going to logically be thinking. We didn't do this to one another. I just happened to be driving at an unsafe speed, and that triggered you. Yeah. This triggered me. We're both triggered. And so, like, now we just need to emotionally bond. Yeah. Because that's the only thing that solves it. Trying to logically create arguments. Yeah. Ruins everything.
That's the hard part, is that because people don't realize that when they have this emotion, instead of taking that out of the perspective like we're talking about, it's our brains are conditioned to start. It's the confirmation bias. It's conditioned to start saying, "I had this feeling. It must have been because I'm right." It's like, well, I am scared and I fucking should be, and then they start defending that instead of actually taking in that other perspective, like you're talking about. Yes. But I love that so much because, I mean, that's just a clear example. And like, also on a side note, I feel like people feel a lot of shame if you question their driving at all.
Yeah, especially if someone has shame complex.
Yeah, exactly. It's a quick way to piss someone off. So you can see that interplay all the time, and especially in relationships, especially heterosexual relationships, right?
Yes. And the thing is, both things are true. Both perspectives are true. Yeah. Like the fact that someone would feel embarrassed that someone came at them and be like, yo, you're driving way too fast. Like, we're way unsafe. Like, that perspective of is true just as much as her being afraid.
Yeah.
What's crazy is, like, I know for a fact that this dynamic isn't just heterosexual.
Yeah.
Because I observed it with my wife and her girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw she had a
Similar
fear
thing.
complex. Her girlfriend had a shame complex. I was trying to make them aware of this, being like, hey, these are our signals.
Yeah.
This is how we need to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
You guys need to work on a framework.
Yeah.
And like, this is how our brains work.
Yeah. That must have been a weird position to be put in.
It was an interesting position.
Yeah, I bet.
I grew a lot from it. But it was really
good.
nice to observe that in a homosexual relationship.
Yeah.
And it's true of all things. Like in typically like whoever you're in a relationship with, someone will have a core vulnerability of fear and the other person will have a core vulnerability of shame on average.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like we said earlier, everybody's got both of these interplays.
Yes.
You know, and so maybe you do have two people that are, you know, have deep vulnerability or core vulnerabilities of shame. And then, but both of them are still going to have core vulnerabilities of fear too. And I think that, I mean, that's what makes a relationship interesting, I guess.
Yes.
Is everybody's just being unique and different in that way. But I think it's just so good to see how this plays out and being able to understand it and grow from it, which is why I wanted to talk about it, because it can be so valuable in people's lives. And I love to hear that it has been valuable in your life too. I mean, that's why you can speak about it so passionately and so well. So I just hope that this helps a lot of people, because it's an important thing to learn about and start to transcend.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
You gotta delve into your vulnerabilities. Once you have a relationship with your vulnerability, then that's familiar territory. So for example, like if you're constantly trying to avoid what's vulnerable, that's the normal. The normal is trying to forget.
Yes.
And while trying to forget, you don't forget it. You hold on to it and you bring it around with you everywhere.
Yeah, you actually kind of give it more energy and more attention by trying to specifically edge it from your life.
Yes.
It's interesting.
It seeps out into every interaction that you have with anyone, because like our bodies wouldn't... You have to constantly... So if our bodies didn't constantly check for bad bacteria being in our bloodstream, we would be dead.
Yeah.
I believe that you can apply that same logic to your emotional state.
Yes.
If you have an emotion and you're not constantly trying to check and account for that emotion, it builds up like a poison in the body.
Yes.
And so when you're trying to forget about your problems, you don't forget about them. They actually are just building up. And so like you'll be having a conversation with a stranger and they just blow the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because like you're not constantly accounting for what you need to account for. And so if you can start to develop a relationship with these vulnerabilities, these things that you need to account for, like do the reality testing that you need to do to be sane, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't be walking around being like, everyone hates me and like I'm a terrible person, or like walking around being like, I'm unsafe all the time.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
As you're going about
It's
your
not
day,
going
right?
to be healthy, right?
It's not going to be healthy. And so if you can develop a relationship with it, then that becomes the new normal. That becomes familiar territory. And once something becomes familiar territory, then that thing is easily can become a habit. And once it becomes a habit, it just works on autopilot.
Yeah, it does.
And so once you can develop a relationship with it, it's very foreign at first. But once you continue to do it, then it becomes a habit. And when your body reacts to a situation unconsciously, like
in your brain.
Exactly. When the body becomes the mind, like and if you just continue to practice being vulnerable, then you don't really feel vulnerable ever.
Yeah.
Because now
because you know how to handle it all that time.
Is the new normal.
Yeah.
Just like forgetting about it is the new normal.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I can tell you that like having vulnerability be normal is way
easier
and takes so much less time
than
like,
constantly trying to kill it.
Yes. And like that's the biggest thing is like you save so much time. You think about like when people are triggered, when people are trying to forget about things, when people are stressed, cortisol is released. Cortisol can take up to 30 minutes to wear down. 30 minutes. So
and it's not good for it to continually run through your brain. It deteriorates your brain to continue experiencing cortisol.
We're the only animal that consistently stays in a hyper-aroused state for extended periods of time. And that's why we can see so much like mental disease, physical disease manifest in the body, because it's such a hyper aroused state. So like, for example, like zebras in
the wild
watering hole in the wild, they see lions. They're not looking at those lions and be like, those fucking lions, man, they're gonna kill us. Those fucking, like, we're in danger, bro. Like, those lions at any moment they could come and kill us, man. Like, those fucking lions over there.
They would never go to the watering hole.
Yeah,
if that was
exactly.
the case.
They would never go to the watering hole. So, like, if an animal's not like being attacked immediately, then they don't experience that hyper-aroused state. Like, that hyper-aroused state is very important to keep us alive. And that's why you need to understand why we have these emotions, because we're just like every other mammal.
Yeah.
We have these for a reason, but like no mammal can be in a hyper-aroused state and be healthy. And so if we can develop a relationship with these vulnerabilities, work through them, test them in reality, work on ourselves, like through cognitive behavioral therapy, neurolinguistic programming, then we can stop being in that hyper-aroused state for extended periods of time, and that is just so beneficial. And it saves you so much time.
Yeah.
Like if you're triggered, 30 minutes of your time could be lost. And so if you're not developing a relationship with
experiencing stress,
if you're not developing a relationship with it, that's normal. That's the standard. And so think about how much time you've wasted in your life being stressed.
Yeah, just burning your brain.
Yeah, just burning your brain. Like, I've saved so much time in the past couple of years by trying to develop a relationship.
Yeah.
It's hard, but once it becomes the new normal, then you're just automatically do it.
And something that we've talked about before, and I feel like just has to be brought up here, is specifically how kind of that transition of the emotional state towards sort of like negative feelings and then trying to like push them away is also like something we talk about a lot, is the negativity bias with these emotional states, right? Because we have a negativity bias for our physical states too, like we were talking about with the gut bacteria, right? It needs to be on the lookout for enemies in order to make sure that it's killing all the bacteria that's harming the biosystem, right? So I see that translating to our emotional state as well, that need to constantly be searching for negative information, negative, emotional and social information in order to sort of like be on the lookout for protecting ourselves. And so it's just like what you're talking about, where we don't need to be in that fear-like state all the time. The zebra does not need to be terrified of the lion all the time in terms of our emotional state. And people don't realize this. I think people don't understand that when they start grasping onto, negative thought patterns about like hating someone or just like talking shit on people, they don't realize that they're actually gravitating towards emotional states where they're detecting fear or they're detecting shame, right? And so I think that's just like an important part of that whole experience. And I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you did, because it kind of ties back to there's biologically a reason for fear and shame. There's biologically a reason to have a negativity bias.
Yeah.
And so like if our ancestors were not concerned with snakes biting them as they walked through a grassy field, we would not be here existing.
If there were snakes in that field, right?
100%. And so like we have all of these emotions for a reason. And so if you can kind of pull back like your monocular lens way you're experiencing these emotions and kind of understand why they're here, then they stop being so overwhelming.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, like I think negatively all the time is because I'm evolved to do that.
Yeah.
Man, maybe I'm not such a negative, terrible person. Maybe that's just how my brain works.
Yeah.
Oh,
it gives you a choice, right?
I'm constantly afraid all the time. Man, maybe that's not a problem with my self-worth. Maybe I'm not so scared, but maybe it's just the way that my brain works.
Yeah.
Like I feel terrible. I feel shame all the time. Like I'm such a shitty person. Maybe I'm not. Maybe like every single human that ever exists like
is experiencing
these same feelings. And so like maybe this is just a part of the human experience.
Yeah.
Maybe if I looked at myself just like I would look at how to take care of a fish, maybe things would start to make a lot more sense. Maybe I could start making environments that would cater to my actual needs. Maybe things wouldn't stop being so overwhelming because I'm looking at myself like some mysterious creature. No, we think and do these things just like every mammal thinks and does things, or every animal existing. Like I believe if we were to approach our mental health, our physical health, just like you would approach the mental and physical health of your dog or your reptile. Like if we were to view Homo sapiens just like we view any other animal in the study of zoology, things would start to make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Things like I think we would live a lot better lives if we mimicked the natural states of our ancestors.
Dude, so this is where I get on my spiel about creating systemic change, because I totally agree. Like I love that analogy of understanding like, oh yeah, I just need to look at my own emotional health and my mental health in terms of how you look at taking care of a fish. It becomes a new part of your hygiene, right? And I like the idea that you would like if you had that power to totally do that for yourself, then you can, right? You can just put yourself in like good situations that cater to your mental health and cater to your emotional health. And the thing that, like, the whole reason I created this podcast is because I don't feel like our culture, I don't feel like the systems that we're involved in actually do prioritize that. In fact, I think that's why mental health is such a pandemic right now. Like, everybody is experiencing, anxiety, depression, some sort of like just helplessness and this feeling that nothing is good enough. And I really do think that our culture is building that. And I think we need to just identify ways that we can make systemic change to help cultivate a good terrarium for us humans. You know, I want to make sure that, like, we are getting, like, when we think of cultivating a society for people's fundamental needs, we kind of are still only focusing on the physical needs. We're like, and we're not even doing it that well, to be honest. Like, we have homelessness, we have people starving, we have people dying because they can't afford to pay their medical bills, right? But even then, if we're like, hey, if we want to be able to give people a good environment, they need their food, their food, water, and a place to sleep, a roof over their head or something like that, medical care. But we're still ignoring this emotional and mental dynamic that you're talking about. And it's only becoming worse because our culture is actively, like, deteriorating our emotional and mental health.
I believe that, like, our culture really favors the Band-Aid step approach. It's not
looking at the root problems.
You go to the doctor, you get prescriptions for the Band-Aid step approach. Like, if you're depressed, they give you antidepressants. They don't focus on the holistic approach of, like, hey, maybe you're not taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
How many hours of sleep do you get? What's your social life look like?
Yeah.
How do you deal with stress? What do you eat?
Yeah.
Like, let's take a holistic approach. And so just because our society caters to that Band-Aid step approach, that means it's our personal responsibility to delve inwards and to create change amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
The fact that we're doing this right now is a mental flex to be a Homo sapien.
Yeah, it is.
Social right now. We're talking about fictional concepts. We're in a room right now discussing zebras, discussing mental health, discussing past events. This is part of the Homo sapien experience. No other mammal can communicate in this way.
Yeah.
So just by embodying what humans do is how you create change.
Nice.
And every single person has had, like, every single person can create such effective change. And now more than ever, people are so powerful at the individual level. We hear this narrative of we're helpless in our government. Like, we're helpless because someone else is putting us down. And this is just the narrative that we've agreed with. How many people are there in the world?
There's 7 billion people.
7 billion people. who really has the power? 7 billion.
7 billion.
And, like, if you can create personal change for yourself, that creates a ripple effect to your immediate environment.
Yeah.
And those people, if they work on themselves, that creates a ripple effect in their environment. And that's how you create massive change. We are not being oppressed by anything. Like, you could say anything can be oppressive through a lens, but not saying that oppression doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that we do not have faith in our own. We don't have faith in how much we can actually create change in our environment.
I think that's very true.
And, like, it's our personal responsibility to try to do that to the best of our ability before we criticize the world.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that is absolutely necessary. But I think we also have to agree that those that are in power and those that are, like, profiting off the system, or at least benefiting from the system, are going to want to maintain it as much as possible. So they kind of want those, like the 7 billion, to feel like they can't make change.
Correct. And
they want them to feel like it's like you just got to stay in your victim mentality because that's all it is ever going to be. So I agree with that. There has to be a spark within each person where they awaken and say, we hold all the power all the time.
Yes.
And so we can make the changes if we want to.
Yes.
And so, I mean, I that's the thing, right? How do we get people to really feel that?
I believe to get people to really feel that, you just need to be an example yourself.
Mm.
You cannot change people.
Yeah.
What you can be is an example of someone that is kind and that works on themselves.
Yeah.
Because that forces someone to incorporate their experience with you into their reality tunnel.
I love that.
So if you're constantly cutting people off because someone cuts you off, if you act to a jerk like a jerk, that makes you a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it just spreads the bleeding, you know?
Yes, 100%. Just like how you have to deal with your emotional states with the good and the bad, you have to do the same thing with
others.
The way that with others. And like in our social institutions, like if we don't like the way that social institutions are run, that bad thing is still a part of how things work. And so you need to work with that. And so what would be the best thing to do? Maybe start to engage in conversations of why this thing isn't working out. Maybe spreading that awareness, maybe interacting with your local state government, right? Like, how can you create the most effective change? How you can create the most effective change is by being honest. That's a huge thing. If you can't be honest, how are you going to change anything?
I've been trying to prioritize honesty a lot more lately. Like, it's sort of like something if you asked anyone, like, hey, do you think you're an honest person? They're all going to say yeah. But like, there's something in me lately that I'm like, I know when I'm lying to people. I know when I'm not being honest.
Yeah.
And there's something I want to change there. And that's very important for people to understand. And so I like your emphasis on doing something within your community, about being honest within your community and making change right within your community. Because like, as much as I love podcasting and the idea of like spreading a message out to so many people, it's drastic. Like, there's just no root to it, because you're kind of just looking at it through a phone, or you're listening to it through headphones. You need to actually go out and do the work with people, if you want to make real change. And I'm starting to realize that.
That goes back to like being human, right?
Yeah.
You need to be engaging socially as we do.
Exactly.
Like, that's how you fit into the zoological lens, right? Like,
that's how we can be healthy.
We're social creatures. Wow. Who would have thunk that
being on a phone all day is not making me feel happy, right?
Yes.
It's crazy.
And it's like, so for example, you were mentioning like, how do you create the change, right? Like, so for me, having to work through my vulnerability through my open relationship, and like, I started to understand the fear-shame dynamic. And by me understanding the fear-shame dynamic, it helping me, I wanted to spread that message.
Yeah.
And so by me just being an example of understanding this, you now think about it in your reality.
It made an impact on me. It really did.
That's the ripple effect.
Yeah.
And because of that, you now are creating a podcast to that. That's how you create change.
Yeah.
You everything is in yourself.
Yes.
You just be the reflection that you most want to see in the world. And there's no one needs to tell you.
Yeah.
Like, you have feelings.
Yeah.
You feel good or you feel bad. You know when you're not being honest because you feel it.
Yes.
You know when you're being truthful because you feel it.
Yes.
Like, yeah, you need to be accountable. You need to be honest. And like what's really amazing is our limbic system does all the thinking for us. Everything for us.
Yeah.
Like, it gives us these like loud alarms. Be like, yo, like, you fucked up, bro.
Yeah.
Like, this is pretty bad. Or, yo, you're doing a really good job.
Yeah.
And then, like, so all the thinking work is already done for us. And so now it's like, you take that information, you use your prefrontal cortex to be like, okay, like, how can I most affect change in the best way possible?
Yeah.
Given this information, right? But like, if our limbic system didn't make things abundantly clear,
what's
we would never
happening
do
right
anything.
now. Yeah.
We would never do anything. We had to think about, yo, man, maybe I should feel bad about this. I don't even remember where the fucking keys are in my house, dude. How the fuck am I going to remember? Oh, do I need to feel bad about this? No.
Yeah.
No. Do I need to feel good about this? No. Like, our limbic system does
hilarious.
all the thinking.
It does.
And
It
so,
really
like,
does.
if you can develop a relationship with it, it becomes your best friend.
Yeah, it becomes a tool.
It becomes a tool.
That's really cool, because I just barely finished this book that was it was called over cutting through spiritual materialism. And one of the things, like, we've talked about this before in terms of like the human ego, right? When I kind of learned to understand what ego was, it was sort of, I created like an overcorrection to just want to be like, I got to cut this out completely, right? But this book is talking about doing the exact same thing that you were talking about with your emotions, and being able, in your limbic system brain. Instead of saying that ego is so powerful, I need to kill it, like we're saying, focusing on it, trying to like cast it out and stuff, you're actually making it more powerful and like a lot more consuming. But as soon as you can learn how to have, develop a relationship with your ego as well, you transcend it by doing that, just like you're talking about with your emotions. And, it makes me think, as above, so below, right? It's just all, I'm seeing these patterns all the time, and I don't know, they're helping me at least, so I hope it's helping somebody.
It is like, you need duality for anything to be experienced. If you didn't, if there was no ego at all the times, that would just be that.
What would that be, right? Yeah.
It would just be it. If there was ego all the time, it would just be it.
Yeah, you wouldn't even know.
To be able to experience having an ego, and to be able to experience not having an ego at times, you need to know what it's like to not have an ego, and you need to know what it's like to have an ego. Like, both things are intertwined, just like light and dark are intertwined. Like they're the same thing, just at opposite ends of the spectrum. And if one were to cease to exist, nothing would exist. Yeah. And so like people are so quick to try to shut out all the negative things, all the bad things, but it's only through those bad things that you can even experience anything good. Yeah,
because otherwise all the good all the time just becomes a different type of bad, you know? You have to experience it somehow. It's just inherent and like essential to everything to have that kind of, you know, duality.
There's duality in all things, the yin and the yang. That is how our world works. And so like to live a good life, you have to be on the border of that.
Yeah. I like how paradoxical it becomes by saying like that there is duality in all things, but we also have to fully understand that they're the same thing because you have to experience both. So then essentially they are the same thing. That's a whole other rabbit hole to go down. But I think that's super important. Even when understanding our emotions, like our positive and negative emotions, I think it can be pretty common on like social media to have like that. It's like a toxic positivity type thing. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's sort of just like, it's like, oh, don't ever feel sad. And if someone's feeling sad around you, just tell them to be happy. Like that, you know, if you just prioritize like feeling this way and totally denying the, you know, emotions that you're experiencing right now, you'll somehow be fine. And so I think understanding that duality in our emotions is super important because I love it whenever like we kind of connect after a little while and you're just like, yeah, I just really came out of a slump. And I was like, and you're always like, but I needed it. Like I needed to have that to gain the perspective of where I want to be and like how to change things. And like, you just have to have that duality in your own emotional life. And I always love that you're so honest about it too. Like people need to be more like you. So
I appreciate it, man. You're very kind, dude.
Sweet.
Yeah. No, everyone has lows. Everyone has highs. Yeah. And if you can develop a relationship with your lows, you can get out of them quicker.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
And just not let them be so low, I guess.
But also to understand that it's important to have the lows. It's important to have a different shift in perspective. Yeah. So that you can then, like, cars wouldn't travel if they were all gas. Yeah. You know, they have to have gas and brakes. It's like that whole duality.
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
You need to stop at times. Like, I like to think of your lows as, like, if you're in a low state, like, and not having the best day or week or month, whatever it is, right? Like, you were just pulling back the catapult to propel yourself forward to having good times.
I like that.
Because, like, you need to have that. Like, you are going to experience those lows.
As long as you kind of let it be that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's easy to kind of feel the low and be simultaneously digging yourself deeper into a negative state. And so I think it's really important to feel that and to see that metaphor in your mind, like, oh, I am being pulled just so I can move back towards better graded things, you know?
Yeah.
And it's important for people to see that. I think it probably happens naturally anyways, but in my own life, you know, with my own experience with depression and stuff, I have seen it where I sort of feel a low phase and I have to feel like shame about it.
Yes.
You know, it's like I shouldn't be sad, especially like I grew up kind of affluent, you know, my parents were not poor. And so like I would see people struggling and then I would feel like shit and I would just tell myself, you can't feel this way. You know, your family has money. You're fine. You know, you could go to a therapist if you wanted to, you know, kind of thing. And so I just told myself that I had to stay in that low and that I deserved that low. And like, I just want anyone to know you do not have to stay in that low. They're there to give you perspective and guidance to move forward in your life, you know, just like what you do with it, you know. It's super important for me to see it that way because then it's like, no, I don't have to stay in the low as if it's like all I am and I have to identify with it. It's just something I can experience and I can value that experience.
Yes.
So it's super important.
And it's super important to use that same perspective on the inverse.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're in the good times. Because it is very important.
Because it's easy to keep chasing that good times. Yeah. And it's just not going to work that way forever. You're going to have a real bad bounce back, I think, if you chase a high for too long, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Life is indistinguishable from effortful maintenance, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Effortful maintenance. I love that. That's what you said. You said all we are is, oh, shoot. It was like in our first podcast, but I loved how you summed up.
All we are is a collection of our habits through linear time.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's all we are as people. Like, we're a collection of our habits, whatever we've been doing, like where the mind has now become the body and just works on autopilot, good and bad, like that's all we are.
Yeah.
And at any moment, we can change our habits.
That's a very powerful feeling to know that, to be like, yeah, we could change our habits. It's not going to be easy. No. It's not always going to, most of the time it's not.
No, it's difficult, man. Yeah. It takes like 22 days.
Yeah,
like your mind really has to work at it, man. It's a struggle, but like once that transition happens, then it functions automatically.
Yeah.
It like works on autopilot.
Well, because it already is, but you're building habits towards something else, something that's not actually serving you. And so I guess maybe that's the step to awakening, like we're talking about, is just seeing that. You're like, oh, I understand that the habits in my life are not actually serving me, and I do have the ability to change my habits. Yeah, it's going to be a pain in the ass at first, but I'm pretty sure it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
I guess this is where I get back to the culture problem, is it's, if you're sitting there having habits that everyone else is having, it's hard to be able to look at it and say it's not serving me. For instance, like my current habit that I've been just working to overcome is just the fact that I work all day at a job that, I'd much rather be doing literally anything else, but I'm working all day, coming home tired. So I just go out and buy food that's not good for me, sit down on a couch and watch TV and numb myself and then go to sleep, and I saw that pattern, but it was hard for me to actually sit there and be like, oh, that's all bad, because literally everyone is doing that right now.
Yes.
It's so common for people to be watching TV all day. People are eating fast food and unhealthy foods all the time. People are being overworked all the time. And this is where, I really do focus on systemic change, because if we had systems, if we had collections of people that could build a new vision, a new idea of what everybody should be doing, or what our habits should be and what those habits should yield for us, like, we're just going to be able to do great things, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's through embracing that, like, kind of going back to viewing everything from a zoological perspective, like, humans need to see change. We need to see progress.
Yeah.
And throughout all the course of human history, progress has been difficult.
Yeah.
So we need to embrace difficult things. What are we doing right now?
We're doing a podcast, which it was difficult at first, but this is this is flowing for me now.
Exactly. But like you put yourself out of your out
of my comfort zone, out of my exactly.
Get out of your comfort zone, and this is where you experience like the best part of life.
Yeah,
is by doing difficult things. So we need to start changing the narrative of like, oh, you can be a millionaire, like, and things will be super easy. Like, no, life is not fucking easy, no matter what you're fucking doing.
Yeah,
and we need to have good stress. Stress isn't bad. Use stress is the only thing that propels us to do anything good.
Yeah.
And think about all the most important things in your life, anyone's life.
Yeah.
If you were to die in a car crash right this second, what would you reflect back upon? You wouldn't reflect upon the things of like, oh man, it felt really good to go out and have this day and like do these things. And like, you reflect upon like, I had like this intimate relationship, and like that intimate relationship wasn't all fucking daisies.
It wasn't easy. Yeah,
it was not easy.
It was something you had to work at.
All the most meaningful things in anyone's life have been difficult.
Have been challenging.
And so like, this is the narrative we need to start to change. It's like, what are you going to do that's challenging that will actually bring you a sense of good gratification?
Yeah.
So like, it's not like, so like, what can people embrace that's difficult? Like, a lot of people are trying to run from anything that's difficult. And like, we fantasize about retiring, or we fantasize about that new thing that we can get because like, oh, it's going to be so easy to just chill and relax and do all these things. But it's like, that, like, you can do that, and like those things have a place in our life, but that's not the meaning of life. The meaning of life is embracing something that's difficult and giving it your all. And that's why we're here. So if people aren't challenging themselves, and like, and you know when you're not doing it, you feel shitty when you watch TV all day long.
I do, yeah.
And this is the thing, is like, everyone has the radar. Everyone has the radar. They know what they're doing is wrong, even if everyone else is doing it.
Yeah.
Personally, based off of your feelings, your limbic system telling you everything that you need to know.
I feel like shit today.
I feel like shit today because I know that this doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
And so like, if we were to shift the narrative to change of like, we all need to be embracing difficult things, and we all need to be helping each other embrace difficult things. Yeah. The hunter-gatherer experience was a difficult fucking experience.
Yeah, it was.
It was challenging, but it was worth it. It was meaningful. That's why we did it.
Yeah.
Like, so like, if the best way to create systemic change would be to first account what you're experiencing. know how develop a relationship with your limbic brain, because if you don't do that, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
If you want to create a business, if you want to do anything, the first thing that you need to do is understand why you feel the things that you do.
Yeah.
That's step one.
Yeah.
Like I would love for that to be like the first course in anything in college.
He's like, understand why.
Oh, you want to be a businessman? Well, guess what? We're going to learn how to do cognitive behavioral therapy because if you don't feel confident to go after and get that deal, that job, like you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
Why the fuck would you want to start a business if you don't even know how to regulate your emotions?
Yeah.
Why the fuck would you want to help people in a nursing home if you didn't know how to regulate your emotions?
Yeah.
Like, I think the first step would be, how do we talk to ourselves? Develop a relationship with that, like start to become friends with your vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So that then you can engage in environments and take the opportunities that you wouldn't take if you didn't make those steps.
Yeah.
If you didn't know how to be vulnerable, you wouldn't get anything in your life. And so most people, they're not, they don't deal with that vulnerability and they blame the world. So if people aren't constantly embracing their vulnerable states, and if they're not striving to do something that's difficult, that's and if they're not like taking care of their health, like if they're not eating,
which in
food,
itself is striving to do something difficult.
Exactly. Yes. And if we were to do that, like the world would be a lot different place.
I think I like how you mentioned that, like, or just when you said that everybody should try and work for something that is challenging to them. It's sort of because a lot of times when I'm trying to think of how to change the system, how to create systemic change, I'm thinking too high level. It's like, okay, so there's this, I perceive this centralized authority, we should change the centralized authority. But it's really like what you're saying is addressing challenges on a personal level. It's not something that's going to be the same for everybody. It just doesn't work like that. We can't centralize the solution for everybody. So it really just it just denotes decentralization as sort of a solution.
Yes.
Having people understand that if they're just active in their own communities and solving problems there, that's the best place to start, for one thing, and that's how you're going to actually make the meaningful change, like you said. So it sounds like we've already kind of built out a vision for people. It's like work towards challenging things, right? That's something that people can actually like tag on to without having to be some complex bureaucratic system. And I think, when I'm ever thinking of like, how are we going to like take down capitalism or something like that, I'm all thinking, oh, okay, we got to create some big like hierarchical structure that's just really complex and blah, 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 and then somehow teach everybody on the planet to do that, but if the vision for people is simply like do something challenging that is going to benefit you, and then just like trust in the process and trust in the fact that everybody else is doing it too. So give him a break, give him a fucking break, please. Then we're going to create massive systemic change and it's going to result in decentralization. Yeah. So I think you cracked it, dude. You figured out how to solve the world.
Just have to be we're all mirrors. We're all mirrors for each other. And all you need to do is take all the information that you find valuable and reflect that.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And then, of course, it has to be said, it's easier said than done.
Yes, very much so. It's a process.
Yeah, that's where we just...
And that's the thing, too, is like anything that you're doing, if it's new, you're developing a relationship with that process. Yeah. You can't beat yourself down if you don't know how to play a magnificent classical piano piece if you're just learning how to play the piano.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like... Everything starts in infancy. We are like anything that you do. If you're now deciding to approach a challenging thing, whatever that is, you cannot judge yourself for not understanding how to do that thing to the best of your ability.
It's your first time.
Yes. But like if you didn't experience that thing of like, man, I don't know how to do this, you would never try to do anything better.
That's true.
So like if we didn't have that shame, it wouldn't push us to do new and better things. So
awesome.
Like
Circling
you need
all the way back.
Understand why you're feeling it. Tell yourself, okay, like I need to look at my prefrontal cortex. Like I need to look at this binocularly. I've never done this.
Yeah.
Why would I think that I could do this? That's a silly thought.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to continue trying because I know over the long period of time, I know if I dedicate a certain amount of time, eventually, if I trust linear time, I'm going to put a lot of hours into this. And once I put a lot of hours into this, now my mind doesn't have to think so much. Now that thing's going to become a habit. And now my body's going to do it.
Yeah.
And then like, that's it.
That's it. That's something that is easy to forget, is just the fact that like I feel like all of us should know that literally if you it's a cliche. I think we do all know it, that if you put your mind to something, you'll get it, But it has to click for you personally. I don't know why. You have to feel it inside. Because I remember I used to use drumming as a huge part of my identity. I was like, I am a drummer. So if I'm not drumming, I'm pretty much dying right now. Like there is no Nathan. But like I was only drumming like once every like month, maybe, right? So then it was just like, why do I suck at drumming? And I was just like getting so pissed. And then like something clicked. It's like, oh, you're not playing. you're not actually drumming. I wonder why you're not doing good. So then I just started like focusing on it, setting goals. And I got back to this place that I felt comfortable. And it actually kind of liberated me because I was like, oh, I don't need to like freak out if I'm not good at something. Because it's like, if I wanted to do it, I could. And that can be liberating for people if you just realize, like, give yourself time, give yourself compassion, and try a challenge. Yeah, do hard things.
That's what's up, man. Yes, and you can do it. Like cool, that was the perfect example of that, man. Yes,
that's perfect. That. Yeah. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.